Okay, well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We welcome to any new faces, and hello again to anyone who has been at the other three sessions. For those who haven't met me, I'm Rod Howells. I'll be sort of facilitating the session today. On the call, we've got Justin Davis from Net Zero Industry Wales, who will be introducing himself. And we also have Ben Wilson, who is a very experienced innovation consultant and also project monitoring officer. I'm not sure what the exact new title is for that.
Monitoring service provider.
Monitoring service provider, yes, that be corrected here. Who will be sharing his insights on monitoring and guiding companies through the grant process. And also a colleague of mine, Glenn Booth, who's innovation and growth specialist with Innovate UK Business Growth, but has also experienced running and leading collaborative projects through. So very much a session where we're going to share experience of running innovation focused grant projects. So we'll kick off. The usual format is that we'll talk through the topic, and then we'll have a Q&A. Please feel free to use the chat right from the start. Any questions that come up as we're talking, we'll try to cover everything during the session. So use that chat function. We'll keep an eye on that. And we will get started. So just to position this why we're talking about it, I'm going to start by handing over to Justin, really to give a bit of scope of who's in Net Zero Industry Wales and the sponsor really of this web series.
Hi everyone. Yeah, thanks for taking the time to attend this, and really looking forward to this session. And yeah, so my name's Justin Davis. I'm the research and projects manager at Net Zero Industry Wales. Our mission is to empower businesses to build greener futures in Wales. And we are the cluster management office for the Southwest Wales Net Zero Launchpad. So working in partnership with the local councils in the region, as well as the businesses seen below as delivery partners, to initially deploy a £7.2 million funds available to companies in the region through various different competition cycles, and then also support more generally the SMEs in the region as well to deploy more funds into Wales. Next slide.
And I think a couple of those partners are on the call here today as well. Mm-hmm. So please chip in into the conversation in the chat if you want to.
Thanks, Rod. Yeah, so the Southwest Wales Net Zero Launchpad, we kind of operate under three pillars of business support, industry outreach, and academic outreach. And this webinar series is obviously very focused on the business support side. Yeah, like I said, trying to give you all the tools to get the best kind of funding opportunities possible to move forward with your various business plans. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Right, so that's who we are and why we're excuse me, here today. We're going to concentrate on running a successful project today. Our previous ones have been finding those grant applications and looking for the right opportunities. The second session was on the writing process itself. So we're assuming at this stage we've been successful. We've written a great application. We've won the grant we were hoping for. and we're going to now look about how to manage that really well. I just saw in the chat a comment around the previous sessions. I'm very aware that some of them haven't worked. We're going to do a bit of a sweep up on that, and I'll make sure that everything's tied up and sent out to people who've registered over the next couple of days.
And just so you're aware as well, we'll be once the whole series is finished, Net Zero Industry Wales will be putting together a blog post around all of this, where we will link the videos within that blog post as well. But we won't be kind of putting that out until the full series is finished.
Yeah. Okay. So, successful projects. So the sort of running order for today's session, we're going to first start with, actually, what is you've got this grant. What is the funding body looking for from you and wants to see, which Ben's going to help us, unpick. We're going to then look at those different levels within that. How do you manage that potentially partner engagement, running the project? How do you work with others in that area? The role of risk management and risk assessment as a tool through a project. The key component of finance and how to make sure you're keeping your budgets on track on what could be and how to do that. And then through to actually what's the ultimate goal of this? Where's the commercialization strategy? What are you going to do by the end of it? How has this helped move you on? So those are the topic areas we're going to cover. So yeah, first off, we've won the project. We know what we've written, what we said we would do. We've had confirmation that we've got the funds. We're going to engage then with the funding body, and I'm interested, Ben, to really hear from yourself. Probably at that point, from your side, what would you see? How would the process go? But in the scope of an Innovate UK program, but I'm sure this mirrors other programs that could happen.
Definitely. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm Ben Wilson. I'm an insight and innovation guy. Spent the last 28 years working with sporting R&D intensive organisations. I've got an academic background in environmental technology. I'm a practitioner of the Institute of Environmental Management and Assessment. And it won't surprise you, therefore, that I'm doing lots in that clean tech, green tech, circular economy, green energy space. I'm involved in monitoring 6 projects in the Launchpad, 3 multi-partner significant green energy innovation projects, and some in the Celtic Sea, and then 3 new innovator projects. So these are innovators that are new to innovation and new to the Innovate ecosystem. So quite different styles of projects and quite different types of organisations. But ultimately, what Innovate want to see, and what most funding bodies want to see, is that you are meeting their requirements, and those requirements will be set out fairly clearly. From an Innovate perspective, the monitoring is a requirement. So Innovate can prove to UKRI, so the UK Research and Innovation, which sits above Innovate, and across the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, and potentially into regional partners like the Welsh Government, that they are managing and delivering an effective performance outcome for their multitude of programs. And in Innovate's world, that is done through independent monitoring service providers like myself, with the right sort of technical skill and capability for the project. So you'll have different types of focus. In this region, the Launchpad is very much about net zero. In other regions, it might be about digital, and you'll have somebody with digital capabilities rather than net zero capabilities. So ultimately, the funder wants to ensure that the money that is invested, it's our money, it's taxpayers' money, is invested into an innovation project to deliver the outcomes that were in the application. That's what the funding is awarded about. But it doesn't mean that it's an innovation project and stuff will go slightly wrong or move in a different direction. And the aim is to try and ensure that the project stays in scope, that you're explaining and expressing and reporting how you're managing and delivering the project in an effective way. And ultimately, we're all safeguarding that innovation investment.
Yeah. So it's very much, from what I hear, but it's very much about getting to that end goal. It's understanding, that's what you said you do. and what you aim to get to at the end, and it's helping you plot that journey from A to B, if you like, trying to stay within the guide rules and the eligibility of that particular grant. And the bit from our previous conversations I hear is, particularly in the Innovate world, it is about having a communication, and almost there's a confidence, but there's also having a clarity so that you're aware of what's happening through that process.
Yeah, so I mean, as part of any application process to secure a grant, you'll set out what you plan to do with the grant. That's normally some form of project plan, project Gantt, with tasks or work packages that say over the 6 months or over the 12 months or over the 18 months, we're going to do these 5 things. And what Innovate and funders are looking for is that you're broadly working towards doing those 5 things. Notwithstanding what I said, it's an innovation R&D project. Things go wrong. Things drift in a different direction. Things, you see a bigger opportunity, and the project shifts towards that. So there's flexibility within there, but the funder wants that flex to be managed and reported, and in some cases approved, and given authority to move in a different direction. So ultimately, you're looking at what did you say you would do, and how are you doing against what you had said you would do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Okay, so you mentioned looking at working with the partners and getting that project plan right. I think we'll move on to that piece next. This is for the pack. We'll send this on. It's making sure you've got the key reports. It's making sure you understand the sort of deadlines. It's maybe using templates if that's required, or creating your own sort of formats for demonstrating the impacts. And it's managing that sort of open communication with the funders are elements that are required. But I also want to dive into next is looking at that relationship of running the project, really. So this is really project management. It's hard enough when you're doing it for your own business, within a business. I also want to talk a little bit about when it's a collaborative project, which brings in another level of complexity. I don't know, Glenn, if you want to touch on this. I know you're suffering with a bit of a cough and a cold, so let's hope
I'll manage, okay, I'm sure. Thank you, Rod. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. My name's Glenn Booth, and as Rod said, I'm currently one of the innovation and growth specialists with Innovate Business Growth. Prior to that, I spent quite a few years as a project manager, some of which was managing Innovate and Smart projects, some in the UK and some with international partners. And I think one of the things, looking at the first bullet point there, defining roles and responsibilities, I think one of the things, if I was starting an Innovate project now, would be to make sure that at the beginning, right at the beginning, everybody's clear on exactly what's expected of them. And that could be a conversation between the various partners in the consortium or within working within the project. I think it's worth spending a significant amount of time early on, making sure that roles and responsibilities are well defined and that each partner is aware not only of what they're due to deliver, but also when. And that gives you a much better chance of making sure that any dependencies that there are between project partners. As an example, Alice is building the hardware, but it's not going to work properly until Bob's completed the firmware for it. Make sure that those responsibilities and the integration points where the hardware and the software have to start working together are well defined early. Saves a lot of aggro, if I can be crude about it, later on, when the plan for you can get into a situation where the plan for each of the project partners looks fine, but when you try to bring them together, you end up with gaps or dependencies that aren't met. So I think with the roles and responsibilities piece, act early and plan, and make sure that it's clear to everybody exactly what they're due to deliver and when, so that you can manage those dependencies. And that takes us down to the design of work packages piece. The second time I did an Innovate project, it was very different to the first time in that we spent some time making sure that the work packages were organized in such a way that there were as few dependencies as possible within work packages between partners. So, for example, if the software work package and if the software work package can carry on and produce an output without any dependency on any other part of the project partnership, there's less chance that you're going to have confusion and less chance you're going to have some kind of dependency on another organization that is difficult to manage. So I'd say it's worth spending time organizing your work packages in such a way that they've got as clear a run at it as possible, and try to do any integration work, any work where output from different project partners and different work packages comes together, as I won't say as late as possible, but after the key deliverables from each separate work package have already been met. Now, that means you've got to communicate well. And going on to the next bullet point that Rod's got there, communication strategies. As a project manager in Innovate projects, I found it was really beneficial to make sure people get lots and lots of warning that a piece of work is expected or a deliverable is expected. For example, the quarterly project reviews, I'd quite often give people at least a month's notice that those were coming up. They frequently get underestimated in terms of the complexity. And if you're in a situation where you've got 3, 4, 5 different organizations all pulling material together for a quarterly review, if you haven't shared that information among the project teams before you go into the quarterly review, it's not going to look joined up. It's going to look as though it's 5 separate pieces of work, not 5 companies working together on one piece of work. So I think being careful to allow time and making sure that people get plenty of warning. It'll get to the point where people think you're nagging, and as a project manager, honestly, I don't care. I'll nag. That's my job. So making sure that people have got enough time to get the work done, whether that be for deliverables or for materials for the quarterly project review, or reports, is really important. So allow time, basically.
Glenn, can I just jump in on that? So you've talked a lot about sort of multi-partner projects, and I think if anyone's in the audience thinking about there's just going to be them delivering a project, and I've got a number of these, particularly in the new innovators, the same in everything Glenn said applies to you. Often we'll see sort of groups of things where I'm going to do some work material evaluation, I'm going to do some digital modeling, I'm going to do some prototyping, but there's no granularity around there. And many small companies, this is the first time they're doing a formal project and delivering a formal project instead of just doing stuff as and when they want to. And so that granularity is really important for a one-man or woman band to actually say, how am I going to apply my, say, 40 hours this week on this project? How far do I need to be by close of play Tuesday? What am I delivering? And getting that granularity there around your personal roles and responsibilities, maybe freelancers or subcontractors that you might use as part of the project, and then also looking at those work packages, tasks and deliverables, again, that granularity. And it really helps you see what you've said you'd do in the granular and work out whether it's possible to do what you think you're going to do in the days that you've got within that period.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think one of the bits I'd add to it as well, I think that clarity on deliverables, clarity on roles and responsibilities, clear communication as it goes along. I think particularly in innovation projects, you can have sort of two types of challenge. You can have ones which are, there's a key moment, do you get the results or not? And that can be a pretty sort of black and white answer. Or you can have it was nearly there. So what happens to the project if one key assumption doesn't land or there's challenge? That then can change the whole project plan. The second one is where I'm sort of think of it as the boiling frog bit, where the time scales are starting just to slip, and they slip again and they slip again. Whether you're waiting for something to arrive, a key sensor or something. Those sort of issues are sort of areas where challenges come up for any project really, and it's how you sort of manage those pieces.
Mm-hmm.
One of the points I've got there is, it sounds probably stronger than it is, managing conflict. I think sometimes people can go into this obviously with a very positive response, but I was thinking about actually doing some planning of what if situations. And I don't know, again, both what your sort of thoughts are on how people should approach what we're going to probably go on to. I'm probably starting to talk about the sort of risk management piece, but in a partnership or in a opportunity, or if you're working with a stakeholder, any suggestions around how to head off problems?
So I think the better defined the deliverables and dates and project plan are at the start, the less likely you are to get into situations where you end up with conflict, if I'm honest. I think if everybody knows that on February the 1st, I'm due to hand this piece of work to Bob, and on the 28th of February, Bob's due to hand it to Charlie, and we've got a document that says when Alice gives it to Bob, it needs to look like this and it needs to pass these tests, then you have a clear set of expectations at each point where you're trying to either complete a piece of work or pass a part-done piece of work onto another project partner. So I don't like conflict, so I tend to prefer to try to prevent it rather than deal with it after it's happened. And my simple advice there would be to define exactly what the deliverables are as well as you can, and make sure that the plan is clear so that there isn't an excuse for people to, in some cases, willfully misunderstand. I had a Turkish project partner who was an absolute master at deliberately misunderstanding what was written down. And it led to excuse after excuse after excuse. But I think if you have a well-defined set of expectations, deliverables, and dates, and it's clear to everybody what's expected, you're less likely to get into conflict situations.
Yeah, great. Okay.
On the larger projects where you have 2 or more grant-funded partners, so this is where 2 or more organisations are getting funding directly from Innovate as part of the project, that relationship's governed by a collaboration agreement that the partners come together, agree how they're going to work together, what they're going to share, what they're not going to share, how to resolve conflict within that agreement, and that's a sort of a formal level. You see that on larger projects or multi-partner projects. At a smaller scale, many of you will be engaging with freelancers or subcontractors as a part of a project, and again, it's about sort of getting the clarity there and ensuring that all the way through that if I'm talking about a cup, we're clear we're talking about this cup, not this sort of cup, because that's when misunderstanding can happen. And often it is just about talking and communicating and being clear around your expectations as well.
Yeah, I think.
And then the final thing about conflict is, things do happen, people do fall out, companies go in different directions. And I think from a sort of a monitoring perspective and from a project management perspective, conflict or potential conflict is something that you would have on your risk register. And if things are starting to break down, it's about escalating up to your monitoring service provider in an Innovate project and having a conversation around that. It could be that the solution is to change the partner, change the sort of the direction of the project, to change the subcontractor. There are often solutions there. It's a lot easier, and this is true about most of the project management, particularly within an Innovate space, to raise issues or potential challenges or opportunities sort of early up the chain to your monitoring service provider and ask for support or guidance or assistance, because she may well be better positioned to be able to plot a route through to get the outcome that you need for the project.
Yeah, and equally, you've made me think about situations where I've seen people who've had grants and have got into a relationship with a subcontractor, and the terms that they have had with that subcontractor may not be beneficial to the grant holder, or just simply not clear. What they've signed up to. They haven't been tight enough on the scope, just like your cup example, to say actually that's what you're delivering for me, and this is what I'm expecting at the end of this. Particularly tied to their commercial plan, they can undo themselves, maybe software development or something like that, about what they've signed up to. So there is some watch outs there, and I'll do a plug for Innovate UK Business Growth on that. In that, with today's session is about delivering a good project. I think there's some good advice and work that people can have before they apply for one, just to set some of those parameters. Because once you're in the project and you've signed up with people, you're off and running. It's harder to unpick it if you can get it right. I think a lot of what I'm hearing is the more you can do before it starts to lay it out well, you can avoid some of these trip hazards. I'm going to move on a little bit. We talked about Gantt charts. I know I may be teaching some people on the call to suck eggs here. I think we're all just fans of Gantt charts, and it wouldn't be a session on project management without me showing a Gantt chart. So do you think of that as a tool? This one, I've just pulled together an example. You can do the clear work packages. You can show what tasks are under it. You can put who's assigned to do it, where you are on progress. You could have a report piece. It's a fundamental tool, isn't it, for project management
and
communicate.
From an Innovate perspective, that this is one of the documents that the monitoring service provider will use as part of the monitoring process, because this sets out your plan to deliver the project across your project phases, across your work packages, across your task responsibilities, deliverables and milestones across the length of the project. And that's not to say you have to stick to this rigidly, because, as I've said before, it's an innovation R&D project and things will happen. But this is to show that you're in control to some level, and you can see where you are in the process, and more importantly, where you're not. You might have jumped ahead, you might have fallen behind. And so this is a sort of a key, something like this, whether it's in a spreadsheet or a Google Sheet or a piece of project management software, something that sets out what your plan is that you can track progress against as part of the sort of one of the three Innovate touchpoint documents, if you like. So there's a project Gantt stroke project plan, there's the risk register, which we're going to come on to, and there's the exploitation plan, which we're also going to talk about.
I think it's actually quite a useful tool as well for the project manager, in that if you are careful to keep your Gantt chart or your project plan updated, you will start to see patterns about where things are going well, whether there are particular tasks that are being a challenge and taking longer than you expected, whether there are certain parts of the team that are progressing faster than others. So it's not, for me at least, it's not a case of do a Gantt chart and then leave it alone for the duration of the project. You can actually learn by keeping them updated, and you'll see where things change.
Yeah, as part of your monitoring, you're going to be required to present on your project process. It becomes very apparent if this isn't a live document, if it isn't being used. And also, from a monitoring perspective, you want to be as open as possible. there's no point sort of pretending everything's okay if it's not, because then the support that's available within the innovation ecosystem can't be brought in to help you. So being open, what most monitoring service providers want to see is transparency, and then a plan to recover. Say you've fallen behind, what's the plan to catch back up? You've seen a big opportunity, what's the plan to exploit that opportunity? So it's about the narrative there around, okay, this has happened, but this is what we're doing about it, or this is what we think we should do about it. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a good chart, it's absolutely dynamic. It's the one you're using, it's the monitoring. But the bit I think is useful as well is, just like any checklist, it allows you to make sure you don't drop, if it's working well, you don't drop some tasks. You're not trying to sort of run it from a piece of paper. You can go, that one is starting, we haven't focused on that for a while. We need to make sure that action point's still up to speed. So it doesn't become a critical item or a forgotten item in the plan. So much talked about, but very useful. I saw a piece on templates. Very happy to share some. This one was a standard template on Excel. So actually, if you look at in Excel and type templates and Gantt charts, you probably find this one. So there are ones available. I'm happy to share the link to this one. Right, moving on from Gantt charts and the real importance of that as a planning tool. We've sort of hinted at this and talked about this. Next piece is the risk registers and risk management, identification of risks, and then assessing how the impact that some of those risks could be. So where could those challenges be? And again, sometimes people see this as a tick box, something they've got to do for their plan. I think it's a really, really valuable tool. I saw that Glenn's gone off mute on his, so I'm assuming you want to say something, Glenn.
I was about to say exactly what you said, Rod, which is that it's a really valuable tool, and I wouldn't be without it. However, again, it's not a case of do it once and forget. You do need to actively manage your risk register and the risks. And in an ideal world, for every risk on the risk register, there should be a mini plan on how you're going to manage if that risk does become an issue. If the risk comes true, what are we going to do? And it's a really useful device for keeping an eye on viability, I suppose, of the project as a whole. If you've got a risk register that's got lots and lots of entries in it, but they're all very low likelihood and very low impact, that's the fact that it's got a lot of entries in it isn't going to bother me too much. Whereas it could be a very short risk register with 3 or 4 very likely, very high impact things logged in it that could really spell bad news for the project as a whole. And I think again, it's one of those things that warrants thought up front. When you originally get into the project, potentially you could be working with new members of staff, new partners with different ways of working. You might be using different tools. You might have people in different countries with different languages, different time zones, and it does help to sit down at the beginning of a project and just say, okay, what could go wrong? How likely is it? And how much of an impact is it going to have if that goes from being a risk to being an issue? And so don't just think of it as a chore that you have to complete at the beginning of the project. It's a useful tool. It will teach you stuff. So I would suggest that actively managing your risk register is it's not only for the benefit of people like Ben, so that they know you're doing it. It will help how you manage the project.
Yeah. Ben, have you got any comments on your side?
Just that there are sort of 6 aspects that a monitoring service provider needs to look at to provide evidence of effective project delivery, and the management of risks and emerging risk factors is one of those. So, smaller projects perhaps don't start with a risk register. They identify some risks, but over time they'll build one up. Larger projects always have a risk register, and Rod's got an example on the next slide. But from a monitoring perspective, we're looking at, is there a risk register? Are risks properly and adequately assessed? Are they up to date? Is there evidence that this is being used in project meetings to drive the project? Are things being added, edited, retired, resolved? What are the mitigations around that? And is there broadly a robust approach to risk management? Are you as a project deliverer doing risk management effectively? And I think the thing to think about is that addressing risk creates opportunities. And actually the process of working out all of the things that could go wrong with your project, and more broadly, some of the things that perhaps connect to your business, during the project and post-project, starts to make you think about the mitigations that you need to do, and therefore how you might overcome those risks. And that can create opportunities. It certainly helps you identify and resolve potential blockers or barriers to the success of the project and or your business. So, it's a really useful tool. There's lots of examples out there. The key thing is that you've thought about it, you're regularly using it, and you're using it with purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things I was reflecting on, wrong way, was, so yeah, here's an example of a risk register. Just to give you a sort of idea, thinking about what the category is, what area you're covering. This one's for construction, describing it, and scoring it. Then coming up with a probability. What is it? What's the potential of this happening from unlikely to almost certain? What could the impact be on your project? And giving yourself a sort of score. That's a nice way to sort of find a way to do it. There's loads online on risk registers. I think it's the discipline of using it really helps, and coming up with those sort of creative strategies to respond to it. I think the sort of things I can see happen, particularly in innovation projects, is you're waiting for a certain deliverable to happen. Success or failure on that. It can be you're waiting for a certain component to be manufactured for you, so time scale, or you've got really a key individual who's involved in the project, and what their role is can also have a impact if it's shaped around the knowledge of one individual. So what are the things you can do to help in those sorts of areas?
One thing I'd also say is, I don't know what Ben's thoughts on this are, but for me, it's very much more comfortable going into a quarterly project review with a risk that's become an issue, and being able to say, well, we saw it coming, we had a plan, and we've now put our mitigation plan into action, rather than going in and saying, oh, well, that came out of the blue and we didn't see it coming.
It's
just nicer.
And there will be real sort of surprises that pop up here.
Yes.
But I think if you keep the risk matrix or risk register fairly broad, that you go beyond the project, because you might focus very much on technical project delivery risks, but if you run out of cash in an organization, then the project won't be delivered. So actually you need to think more broadly than that. There are some risks that just very hard for you to mitigate against, geopolitical risks, but there could be things, particularly say in the low carbon space, that will have an impact and need some mitigation, or perhaps a different direction. If your plan was to go global with a clean piece of clean energy, maybe your plan in the last few weeks is to more focus on UK European markets, for example. So you can come up with mitigations for sort of much bigger, broader risks.
Yeah, I think it's a good point as well. Just to emphasize, both on the Gantt chart and here, to look across all aspects of the project. So the project management itself, not just the technical delivery, and the commercial plan as well. Where are we moving along, and what are the risks along all of that, those components, and the finances, for the next bit. So where are we looking at the next round? So it may even be things which you're looking at broader than the absolute project, but it'd be worth looking at it in the whole.
A couple of examples of that would be COVID-19, which impacted a number of projects I was working on, and the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which heavily impacted a project I was working on. And neither of those were on the risk register, but they were obviously had a significant impact on the way we were able to do business, and things like that. I think you once you see them coming, obviously you document them and come up with a plan. But I wouldn't expect everybody to, or I wouldn't expect all of those things to be captured as an early part of a risk register before they'd actually become apparent.
Yeah. So when there's who'd have the unexpected things that come out of the blue also can impact projects, and globally, as you said, there's things that happen on a global scale that we might never have influence over, but we've got to react to. Conscious a bit on the time, so I'm watching that a little bit. But there's two more bits I want to talk about, which is the finance and then the commercial plan. Anyone who's got any questions, do please put it into the chat. Financial monitoring. So we've talked about the plan itself. Inherently, there'll be financial risks to manage and monitor. I don't know what people's aspects are on keeping on budget, because I mean, Ben, in your world, you'll be seeing people putting claims in.
Yeah, totally. Well, let me cover this one off then. So this sort of fits with the project plan. So you've got your plan how you're going to deliver it, but that plan requires money to do that delivery. And so, when you receive your grant, the grant's a grant. You can't have any more, but you can have less than the grant if you don't evidence enough activity. And ultimately, the grant is split into cost categories: labour, overhead, materials, travel and subsistence, and so on. So you will have a plan to say, here's my delivery, and this is what that's going to do in terms of my spend profile. And as part of the monitoring process, you will update on a quarterly basis your claim or your evidence to show your actual costs, so what's been incurred and paid, and the evidence could be around activity based. So if it's labour or overhead based, it's based on time done, so that would be a timesheet, or it's actual spend based, so that would be invoices and receipts. And the aim, from a monitoring perspective, is to make sure that you are forecasting effectively, or as effectively as possible, and you're delivering on that forecast, and you're budgeting. Now, things, as I say, will change, and that's fine. There's a chance every quarter to reforecast and to reflow the budgets, and there's the ability to move costs around the cost categories. You have to formalise that, but there's the ability to do that. So, many of you will be using some form of Making Tax Digital cloud-based accounting software. Some won't be. Some are still, working off Google Sheets or spreadsheets. The key thing about all of this is just about organisation. That once a quarter, you have to provide all this evidence. And if it's in the equivalent of a digital shoebox, that is hard and time consuming. So it's just about being organised, both in terms of understanding what you're going to spend, so that's your forecast, and having the evidence to show what you have spent.
Yeah. Excellent. And I think it's, again, as a sort of theme through it, being realistic about all of these areas, and the more you can be on the front foot with looking ahead to what the potentials are, the better. And I think also the bit I'm aware, that communication between the funding body, if you like, whether it's through the monitoring system or whatever fund you're using, so there's no nasty surprises for them, that's a much better approach. I think, Glenn, we were talking yesterday and you were saying, if you sort of thinking, should I talk to I'm still stuck in the old phrases, monitoring officer, then you probably should to take words out of your mouth. Yeah,
I think so. I think it's always better for the monitoring officer to be forewarned and forearmed, and the less surprises there are through an Innovate project, the better, in my opinion.
Yeah. Good. Okay, so looking at finance, the last topic I want to talk about, and probably in one way, the whole reason for doing the projects lying it is that commercialization. Why are we doing these projects in the first place if it isn't getting it to reality? And I think we wanted to emphasize, sometimes you can see projects which can get tied up in the technical elements of it, sometimes because that's where the comfort zone is for the people involved in the project. That's ultimately what also the focus is needed to get to this, because you need the results often to do it. But you shouldn't be forgetting, in fact, it should be at the heart of it, what the purpose of this is. Where do I would almost use that sort of phrase, keeping the end in mind. What is it? What is the purpose? Direction of travel? What's our North Star? I don't know, Ben, Glenn, what your thoughts are on this.
Well, I suppose a couple of things for me. One is your developing exploitation and commercialization thinking will be monitored all the way through the project. For larger projects, you'll have done an initial exploitation plan, but that needs to be worked on and developed and refined. For smaller projects, you'll build that during the project. And when you get your grant offer letter from Innovate, which is effectively the contract from Innovate with the grant, that has a contractual clause to say that you will spend 5 years working to exploit or commercialize the results of the project. So you're signing up to commit to do this, and how Innovate makes sure that you've got a plan is to say, have you got a plan? And so very much a thing about planning exploitation and that developing across the project, and then a post-project plan for exploitation and commercialization is really important. In a way, there's no point doing R&D innovation unless there's a strong exploitation commercialization opportunity to the other end. You're unlikely to get funding if that commercial exploitation opportunity is weak, and Innovate want to see projects that they fund go on to commercialize and exploit. So it's a really critical part of the monitoring. It's a really key part of what you need to do as part of your project, and it's what's going to drive success and growth in Southwest Wales more broadly, the UK as well, getting these projects commercialized, exploited, into market and generating cash.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah. And I think one of the themes I'm sort of picking up from today is the amount to think broader than just the technical delivery, thinking about the project management from the aspects of the pure project management component, the financial management of the program, and the commercial management all need to be moving along almost with the equal. There may be different bits you're focusing on through that, but for the duration of the project, all of that needs to be moving forward and monitored.
Yeah, and just from a monitoring perspective, the monitoring service provider needs to provide evidence to Innovate of project delivery across 6 aspects. The first one is scope. Are you broadly saying what you would do within the application? The next one's about delivery activity. So how are you proceeding? Are you ahead? Are you behind? What are you actually doing? And providing evidence of that. One of the strands is around cost. So where are you against your sort of financial forecast, your plan to spend? Are you behind? Are you in front? What's the justification or rationalization of that? What's the evidence around that? Planning exploitation. So where are you on your exploitation commercialization thinking? Emerging risk factors, so how are you managing risks? And then a final strand, which is really around future project management and challenges. So how are you finding running this project? How do I or my colleagues see you being able to deal with this project? So we're looking for evidence of good activity in all of those 6 strands, and then we're scoring them 0 to 5. And then that report goes to Innovate as part of the overall project and program performance monitoring.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's great insight for anyone who's going to be involved in these things about what's, how that interaction happens and the importance that this element has to it. I think the bit for me is almost by the end of the project, where do I want to be? What are the things I've got in place? Because if I need the next round of funding, if I need to go for the next grant, if I need to have key partners lined up, if I want to be presenting this to a potential customer, what are the things I need to do while I've got this funding that can help me get to that place. Again, I'm probably do a pitch both for the launch pad and the team that's delivering that, and for the Innovate business growth. That's what that support around the Innovate funding is there to do, is to help on these elements. So you don't have to look at this alone. That's where those services are there, and using the monitoring service, again, the knowledge that people have there is to help. So use all the resources you can to help on these elements.
And be nice to your monitoring officer. Seriously, they're very valuable people. They go, excuse me, I'll say this because I'm sure Ben's too modest, but they have a lot of experience, they have a lot of knowledge, and particularly if you need guidance on how Innovate projects work or what you should be doing at a particular time, I've found personally that asking the MO usually is the quickest way to get a resolution.
Great.
And I've just put it in the chat, but please feel free to ask any questions in the chat. Anything about what we've talked about, anything not clear. The presentation will be shared. The documents will be shared as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Great. So, that's where I wanted to get to at the end of this session today. We've talked about things to think about beforehand. We talked about the ways to sort of structure a project, the project management. We've had thanks to Ben for the great insight on what actually funders will be looking for in there. We talked a little bit about financial management, and we talked about the importance of that commercialization plan. Is there anything we've missed, guys?
Well, I suppose the not that we've missed, but there were some good sort of resources on the Innovate site within Innovate Business Growth, Innovate Business Connect, around how to get to this point where you've won a grant, but then what to do when you've got it. Some guidance around what costs are applicable, some videos around what next, how it works. When your project goes live, you'll get a pack of documents and templates, not about Gantt and risk. And I suppose the thing to just reiterate is that it's your project to run. It's not for anybody to get involved in that. So there's a sort of a red line that I can't step over. Some of Rod's colleagues in the innovation and growth team can give you much more one-to-one hand-holding support, but ultimately it's your project to deliver. There's support, help, assistance, guidance within sort of this bigger community, within the innovation ecosystem, within the region, within the launch pad. There's a lot of support and help out there to try and give you everything you need to succeed.
Yeah, thanks. And the next session we're doing, and the final session in the series, is about, we've had a successful project. We're going to be talking more about this commercialization and sort of route forward. So what's the next stage for people who've had a project? What type of support's available in the ecosystem, and maybe other sources of funding and finance we'll start to touch upon. So I hope you found it useful. We'll be sending all the resources out, as we said. We've got everyone's emails. Last chance for any questions before we close. I may. Really helpful. That's good to hear. Okay, I'm glad about that. We will close the session now. I do appreciate everyone's time. Thank you very much, Ben. Thank you very much, Glenn, for all that really useful insight. I learned stuff too. So thank you very much. And
thanks for the opportunity.
We'll see you. Anyone who's joining us next week. Cheers now. Okay.